I woke up after a long sleep. The last thing that I remember was that I participated in a game jam. I opened the main page of the jam, and that's when I saw it. What is up, guys? I'm Shivam Pandey, and you're watching the Techpreneurs. So, recently I participated in a game jam that was the Nikhil Malankar game jam. In this jam, you have to create a game in a week, and the theme of the jam was Bada Soch. As the theme was very abstract, and as I have some other projects to work on, I wasted the first 4 days of the jam doing nothing related to the jam. And one fine day, when I opened the main page of the jam to look how much time I was left to create the game, and then it showed me that I was left with less than 3 days to create a game for the jam. Fortunately, one of the 3 days was Sunday, and on regular days I cannot work full time on my game development thing. I can only work for around 3 hours a day, but on Sunday I can work for a whole day on my game. So still I have some hope left for the game jam, and I didn't quit it. As I was left with a short period of time and the theme of the jam was very abstract, I thought that I would create a very simple game as soon as possible and use the rest of the time left to polish my game as much as possible. So the main aim was to create a small but a very polished game. So the very first idea that came into my mind for creating the game was of a top-down shooter, and I started creating some basic code for that. I was thinking of some kind of a twin stick shooter in which you can move the player with WASD keys and the player will point in the direction of your mouse cursor. Also, if you click the mouse, then the player would shoot. So as the player can move and shoot, it needs something to shoot into. For that, we need to create some enemies in our game. There are 4 types of enemies in our game, and I started with a very basic enemy, that is a follow enemy. This enemy would follow you wherever you go, and if you touch the enemy then you lose a life. The second enemy that I created was a single shooter enemy. So it has a fire point, and with that fire point it can shoot bullets into you, and if you touch the enemy or you touch the bullet, one life is gone. The next enemy that I created was a bit random, as this enemy would move randomly around the screen with X and Y velocity, and it would act just like an obstacle. You have to avoid it or you have to shoot it, but if you touch it then you lose a life. The final type of enemy is a 4 directional shooting enemy, which again follows you, but it has 4 different fire points pointing in 4 different directions, and it will shoot bullets time to time. So finally, if we see, the game is progressing towards some kind of a bullet hell game, but still the game looks like a normal twin stick shooter with no other twist that I can add. So I thought of a twist that I need to add in the game, and that would also match with the theme of the game jam. Now there are 2 states in the game, a control state and a follow state. In the control state, you have full control over the player using the WASD keys, and you can direct the shoot of the player using your mouse cursor, and it is much easier to play. But the next state is a follow state, which is much harder to play. In this state, you have a very less control over the speed and the movement of your player, because in this mode the player would constantly look towards the cursor of the screen and also move towards the cursor. So this mode would create a bit of difficulty for the player, as the player has to move and dodge the bullets at the same time it has to shoot the enemies. And as you have no control over the movement of the player is constantly moving towards the cursor on the screen. So you have to be very alert during the play when this mode is enabled. And to ramp up the difficulty a bit more, the game would constantly change its mode after a certain time interval when the slider bar goes to 0 and a random of these modes are selected. So this mode switching would increase the pace of the game, and the player has to be attentive throughout the play, because one time he would be controlling the player through the keys, but the other time he would be controlling the player through the mouse cursor. So it is a test of your reflex. So that was all I could do with the gameplay aspect of the game. The next thing that I added to my game was polish, polish and polish. So to start things off, I changed the color of all my enemies, bullets and the player and the background of the game, so that they blend well together with each other and they look much more better than just black and white themes. After that, I added a whole lot of post processing to my game. It makes the game looks much better than the previous one. In the post processing, I firstly added some bloom to my game, then a bit of small grains on the screen, and then I added a vignette to the game, and then it made the game look much better than a normal version. After I was done with the post processing of my game, the next thing I did was create some particle effects for my game. Firstly, I started off creating a burst particle for the enemies that would be instantiated each time my bullet hits the enemies, which would be of the respective color of the enemies that you encounter. After that, to make it a bit more clear that your player is hit in the game, I added 4 different things to my player. The first one was I copied the burst particle system that I created for the enemies and copied it to the player. So each time the player is hit, some yellow burst particles would be emitted, signaling the player that you have lost one life. The next thing I added was a red overlay on the screen, also giving an indication that you have lost a life. After that, to spice things a bit more, I added a camera shake each time the player is hit, so it is very clear now that you have lost a life in the game. And the fourth thing that I added was to give the player a bit more room to get to a safer zone after the hit was a blinking animation to my player. And while this blinking animation is played, I disabled the collider of the player. So for a couple of seconds, no enemies or bullets can hit the player and the player can move to a safer zone, giving it ample time to come back. And now the game looks much more better than the previous version, and also it gives the player a proper feedback about what is going inside the game. After the visual polishing things, I jumped into the audio stuffs of the game by adding different sounds and background music to my
control. Follow. Game over. Control.
And now the game was almost in the verge of finishing. So to make it presentable, I added a main menu, a tutorial section, and a credits panel to my game. In the main menu, I had 3 buttons: the play button, a tutorial button, and a credit section button. And each time you hover your cursor over the buttons, the button would expand, and each time you leave the button would shrink to its main size. Also, to make things more clear, I added my player prefab to the main menu also. And this player would point towards the mouse cursor and move towards it with a certain velocity, giving it a somewhat better look. Also, when you start playing the game, you would encounter a story panel that would brief you with the basic background of the game so that you have in your mind that what is going on. And now the game looks completely finished, and the next thing was to build the game. Although many of the games in the submission page of the gem was either built for the Windows platform or for the Android platform, but I thought if I put it in the WebGL format, then it would be easier for the player to play it and rate the game, and published it on the itch.io page. I wrote a bit description about the game, gave it a title, added a bit of screenshots, and now my game was ready to be published for the gem. Although one thing I noticed in my build was, although everything was working good in my editor, but if I played the WebGL build on the internet, then at the main menu, the player prefab that I had was suddenly not there, and the menu screen looked a bit empty. I tried to find its solution, but of no use. It was working good on the editor, but I don't know why it wasn't working on the WebGL build. And as the time was nearing the deadline for the submission, I thought I should keep it in that way only, because all the other parts were working fine, just the main menu was not working as intended. So I left it in that manner only and published my project to the gems page. The link to the project is in the description. You can try out the game, play it on your browsers, and send your feedbacks either to the page or to me on my Discord server. Link to all those would be in the description. So that was it for today. It was my second experience participating in a game jam. I generally do not participate in the game jams because they are of 48-hour game jams, and as I am in school right now, so I can't give all the 4 hours creating a game because I have to do some other works also. So I generally try not to participate in a game jam. But as this jam was a 1 week long jam, so I thought I could give it a go. And finally I finished my game for the jam. and had a pretty good experience. So that was it for the video. If you
Control.
like the video, consider subscribing and hitting the like button. If you have any feedbacks regarding my game or this YouTube video, then you can join my Discord server. The link is in the description. And if you have
Control.
participated in the game jam, then send me the link of your game. I would love to play all those games. And we'll see you in the next video. Till then, dream big, hustle hard, and keep watching the Techpreneurs. Bye.